After the divorce, my wife took half the business. Finally got rid of you, she laughed. A year later, her lawyer called. We need to talk. Turns out, she hadn't read the... It all starts so small, doesn't it? The little cracks in the foundation that you ignore. You tell yourself it's just the house settling. You paint over them. You pretend they're not there. Our house was a monument to that kind of denial. A big, beautiful, minimalist box of glass and steel overlooking the city, full of expensive furniture that I had designed and built with my own hands. Each piece was a testament to my craft, my passion. And each piece felt as cold and empty as our marriage had become. I remember one particular Tuesday. It was late October, the kind of evening where the air gets crisp and carries the faint smell of wood smoke from somewhere far away. I was in the workshop, my real home. The scent of freshly sanded oak was thick in the air, a perfume I preferred to any other. The low hum of the dust collector was my favorite symphony. I was running my hand over a tabletop, feeling for the slightest imperfection. My phone buzzed on the workbench, rattling against a stray chisel. It was Jessica. Mark, honey? Her voice was a little too bright, a little too smooth. It was her public voice, the one she used for clients and important people. Hey, I'm still at the shop. What's up? I know, you're always at the shop. A little laugh, but with an edge like broken glass. Listen, the charity gala is running late. The car service I booked had to leave. Could you be a darling and come pick me up? I sighed, looking at the half-finished piece. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say, we're worth millions, Jessica, just call another one. But that wasn't how we worked. I was the reliable one, the fixer, the foundation. Yes, sure. Where are you? The Grand Majestic Hotel, Ballroom C. I'll meet you out front in, say, 30 minutes? Okay, see you then. I cleaned up, the familiar ache settling into my lower back. I switched off the lights, the big industrial lamps groaning as they cooled. The silence that rushed in felt heavy. Driving through the city, the lights blurred into long streaks of neon. Our business, Artisan Creations, had its name on a sleek, modest billboard downtown. Jessica's idea. She was the face, the networker, the one who turned my quiet passion into a loud success. I was the hands, the soul, the guy covered in sawdust who made it all possible. We were supposed to be a team. I pulled up to the Grand Majestic exactly 30 minutes later. It was a palace of polished brass and red carpets. Valets in sharp uniforms hurried back and forth. I saw people in tuxedos and glittering dresses spilling out of the entrance, laughing, their voices echoing in the cool night air. But I didn't see Jessica. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. The flow of people thinned. I sent her a text. Here. No reply. Another 10 minutes crawled by. I started to feel that familiar knot in my stomach. The one that told me I was an inconvenience, a tool to be used and then put away. I finally killed the engine and got out, the cold air biting at my cheeks. I walked toward the grand entrance, feeling out of place in my work jeans and flannel shirt. The doorman gave me a look that sized me up and found me lacking. I ignored him and peered into the lobby. It was opulent, dripping with gold leaf and chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls. And then I saw her. She wasn't in Ballroom C, or anywhere near the main event. She was tucked away in a quiet corner of the hotel bar, a dimly lit space with dark wood and leather chairs. She was leaning in close to a man, her hand resting on his arm. Her laugh, the real one, the one I hadn't heard in years, drifted across the marble floor. It was intimate and genuine. It was a sound that was no longer meant for me. The man was handsome in that generic, expensive way. Perfect suit, perfect hair, a watch on his wrist that probably cost more than my first car. He said something, and she tilted her head back, her smile radiant. They weren't networking. They were something else. My heart felt like it had turned to lead. It just sank. I stood there, hidden behind a large potted palm, feeling like a ghost watching a life I was supposed to be a part of. Finally, she saw my text. I watched her check her phone, her smile faltering for a second. She said something to the man, touched his cheek briefly, and then stood up, smoothing down her silk dress. She walked out to the front of the hotel, her expression shifting back to one of mild annoyance. "There you are," she said when she saw me. "I've been waiting." The lie was so easy, so effortless. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I opened the car door for her. The drive home was silent, not the comfortable silence of two people who know each other, but the loud, screaming silence of a vast, empty space between them. The car was filled with a scent that wasn't hers. It was a subtle, expensive cologne, the same one I'd smelled a few times on her clothes when she came home late from client dinners. I didn't say anything that night, or the next day. I just went to the workshop and let the noise of the saws drown out the noise in my head. I worked until my muscles screamed and my mind was numb. Work was my refuge. It was the only thing that made sense. The crack had become a canyon. I couldn't paint over it anymore. A week later, I was cleaning out the car, and a small piece of paper fluttered out from under the passenger seat. It was a receipt. From the hotel bar at the Grand Majestic, dated the night of the gala, but time-stamped at 7:30 p.m. The gala didn't even start until 8. It was for 2 glasses of a very expensive single malt scotch, an amount that made my eyes water. That was it. The small, simple proof, the linchpin that held all the other little doubts and fears together. It wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't just my insecurity. It was real. The confrontation was quiet, almost civilized. I waited for her to come home that evening. I had placed the receipt on the polished surface of the black walnut coffee table I had spent 100 hours perfecting. She walked in, kicked off her heels, and sighed. "Tough day," she said, not looking at me. "Yeah," I replied. "Looks like you had a tough night last Tuesday, too." She stopped. She saw the receipt. Her face was a mask, but I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. First came the denial. "What is this? Did you go through my purse?" Then came the gaslighting. "You're being ridiculous, Mark. You're so paranoid. That's Richard. He's a potential investor. We were just talking strategy." At 7:30, before the event even started, your strategy involved $200 glasses of scotch. The mask finally cracked. Her expression turned cold, hard. She looked at me not as a husband, but as an obstacle. "Fine," she said, her voice flat. "You want to know? Yes, I'm seeing him. And yes, he's an investor. He's going to help me take the business to the next level, a level you could never get to with your head buried in sawdust." The words were meant to hurt, and they did. They were surgical. "What about us, Jessica?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She laughed, a short, cruel bark. "Us? Mark, look at this house. Look at our lives. It's a business. It's been a business for years. You're the talent, I'm the management. And frankly, I've found a better business partner." That was the moment my world shattered. Not with a bang, but with the cold, clinical precision of a business transaction. My marriage, my life, my love. It was all just a line item on a balance sheet she was ready to close. The divorce was a nightmare, a slow, grinding process designed to strip away your dignity along with your assets. Jessica was ruthless. She had the better lawyer, a shark in a $3,000 suit named Mr. Harrison. My lawyer, David, was a good man, but he was a small-town family lawyer, not a corporate gladiator. He was constantly on the defensive. Jessica wanted half of everything: the house, the savings, the cars. And she wanted half the business, not just half the value. She wanted half the company, 50% ownership. "Don't do it, Mark," David warned me in his stuffy little office that smelled of old paper and coffee. "She's not entitled to half the company itself, just half of its current valuation. We can fight this. The business was built on your skill, your intellectual property." But I was tired. I was broken. I didn't have any fight left in me. The thought of spending months, maybe years in court, dissecting every part of our life, was more than I could bear. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted the pain to stop. "Just give it to her," I told David. "Let her have it. I just want to be done with her." David looked at me with pity in his eyes. He tried to argue, but my mind was made up. I was signing my own surrender. The day we signed the final papers was gray and overcast, the sky the color of dirty snow. We sat across from each other at a long, polished table in Harrison's office. Jessica was beaming. She looked vibrant, alive. She was dressed in a sharp power suit, looking every bit the successful CEO she was about to become. I felt like a ghost, hollowed out and transparent. I signed the documents without reading them. I didn't care what they said. It was the price of my freedom. As I pushed the stack of papers across the table, Jessica picked up her pen. She signed her name with a flourish. Then she looked at me, a triumphant, malicious smirk on her face. She leaned forward and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Finally got rid of you." Then she laughed. Not her musical laugh, but that short, cruel bark. It echoed in the silent, sterile room. That laugh followed me out of the building. It followed me back to the empty, echoing house that was no longer mine. It followed me as I packed my few personal belongings into cardboard boxes. I left behind all the furniture I had built. I couldn't bear to look at it. Each piece was a monument to a lie. I moved into a small, rented apartment above a bakery. The constant smell of baking bread was comforting. I used what little money I had left to rent a small, dusty garage space. It was a quarter of the size of my old workshop, with poor lighting and a concrete floor stained with years of oil and grime. It was a humiliating step down. But the moment I plugged in my old table saw and it roared to life, I felt a flicker of something. The first flicker of life in months. The first year was the hardest of my life. I was alone. Most of our friends had been Jessica's friends, and they sided with her. I didn't blame them. She had the money, the success, the story. I was just the sad ex-husband who couldn't keep up. I heard things. Artisan Creations was thriving, at least on the surface. Jessica and Richard, the man from the hotel bar, now her official partner in business and life, were everywhere. Social media, magazines, local news. They were the new power couple. They were expanding, rebranding. They were talking about franchising, about a new line of more affordable, mass-produced furniture. They were gutting the soul of what I had built, turning my art into a commodity. It was like watching someone take your child and dress it up in cheap, tacky clothes. I ignored it. I focused on my work. I started small. I did repair jobs. I built simple, honest pieces for people who appreciated craftsmanship. A bookshelf for a young teacher, A dining table for a growing family, a rocking chair for a grandfather. My hands remembered their purpose. The feel of the wood, the precision of the joinery, the satisfaction of creating something real and solid. It slowly started to heal me. I wasn't making much money, but for the first time in a long time, I felt content. I was just a man in a garage, building things, and that was enough. Then, about a year and a few weeks after the divorce was finalized, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number with a downtown area code. "Is this Mark Peterson?" The voice was slick and professional. "Yes, this is him." "Mr. Peterson, this is Daniel Harrison. I represent Jessica Lowell. I believe you know who I am." My blood ran cold. Harrison, her lawyer. What could she possibly want now? Hadn't she taken enough? My mind raced through a dozen terrible possibilities. Was she suing me for something? Claiming I had violated some part of the agreement I hadn't even read? "I know who you are," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. "Good," he said. "My client and I would like to request a meeting with you. As soon as possible. It is a matter of some urgency." "A meeting about what?" There was a pause. "It concerns the divorce settlement and the articles of incorporation for Artisan Creations. We need to talk." There it was, that phrase. We need to talk. The last time I'd heard words like that, my life had fallen apart. A sense of dread washed over me, but it was mixed with something else. Curiosity, urgency, he'd said. What could possibly be so urgent? "Fine," I said. "When and where?" We agreed to meet at his office 2 days later. For those 2 days, I was a wreck. I couldn't work, I couldn't eat. I just paced my small apartment, the smell of bread from downstairs doing nothing to soothe me. I called David, my old lawyer. He was surprised to hear from me. I told him about the call from Harrison. "That's odd," David said thoughtfully. "Very odd. Usually when a shark like Harrison calls, it's to attack, not to talk. Be careful, Mark. Whatever it is, they want something from you." He offered to come with me, and I gratefully accepted. I wasn't going to walk into that lion's den alone again. The day of the meeting, I put on the only decent suit I owned. It felt strange and constricting. When David and I walked into Harrison's ridiculously luxurious office, they were already there. Jessica and Richard, sitting side by side on a sleek leather sofa. Jessica looked different. The triumphant glow was gone. She looked tired, her face tight with stress. Richard sat beside her, looking impatient and annoyed, constantly checking his phone. Harrison gestured for us to sit in the chairs opposite them. The air in the room was thick with tension. For a few moments, nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the city traffic 12 floors below. Harrison finally cleared his throat and began. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Peterson. We'll get straight to the point. As you know, my client, Ms. Lowell, has been working diligently to expand the operations of Artisan Creations." He slid a glossy brochure across the table. On the cover was a picture of a gleaming new hotel lobby, filled with what looked like cheap imitations of my designs. We recently secured a major contract to furnish the entire new line of Zenith Grand hotels. It's a multi-million-dollar deal, a company-making opportunity. I just stared at him, saying nothing. Where was this going? Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair. During the finalization of the contract, Zenith's legal department conducted an exhaustive due diligence process. They examined every corporate document, every contract, every filing since the company's inception. He paused, glancing at Jessica. She refused to meet my eyes, staring intently at a spot on the expensive rug. In their review, Harrison continued, his voice now a little less confident, they flagged a particular clause in the original Articles of Incorporation, the ones you filed when you first established the company, almost 11 years ago. My mind went blank. The original articles? I barely remembered them. I had downloaded a template from a legal website. I was just a 25-year-old kid in a garage with a dream back then. I filled it out myself to save a few $100 on a lawyer. What on earth could be in there? Harrison slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a copy of a page from that original filing. He had highlighted a section. It was titled, Article 7, Intellectual Property and Key Person Provision. My heart started to pound. I leaned forward and read the words I had written over a decade ago and completely forgotten. The clause was simple. It stated that all designs, schematics, and creative works, the intellectual property, were assets of the company, provided that the designated head craftsman, identified by name as Mark Peterson, remained an active, voluntary participant in the company. It went on to state that if the head craftsman were to be removed from his position involuntarily, or if his ownership stake was diluted against his will, then the full and exclusive rights to all designs created by him would immediately revert to him as personal property. The company would retain the name, the equipment, and the client list, but it would lose the right to produce or sell any of the designs that were the foundation of its entire catalog. I had put it in there as a kind of safety net, a naive 25-year-old's attempt to protect his art, never imagining it would ever actually be used. I thought it was just standard boilerplate. I looked up from the paper, first at Harrison, then at Jessica, and for the first time, I understood. I saw the panic in her eyes, the desperation. The Zenith legal team, Harrison said, his voice now strained, has concluded that because your departure from the company was a direct result of the divorce proceedings, a constructive, involuntary termination, in their view. This clause has been triggered. Artisan Creations does not own the legal rights to the furniture designs they have been contracted to produce. They are in material breach of their contract before they've even shipped the first chair. Zenith is threatening to sue for damages, catastrophic damages. The silence in the room was absolute. Richard finally spoke up, his voice sharp and angry, pointing a finger at Jessica. I told you to have your lawyer vet everything. I assumed you actually owned the things you were selling. Jessica flinched as if he'd slapped her. My lawyer did vet it, she shot back, glaring at Harrison. Harrison looked pale. We vetted the divorce agreement, Jessica. We had no reason to dig up the decade-old incorporation papers you filed yourself. We assumed something so fundamental would have been handled correctly. It was beautiful. A perfect circle of blame. And I was sitting right in the center of it, watching it all implode. Then, my lawyer, David, who had been sitting quietly beside me this whole time, cleared his throat. He had a small, gentle smile on his face. Actually, Mr. Harrison, David said calmly, it's a bit more complicated than that. Everyone turned to look at him. You see, David continued, opening his own briefcase and pulling out a document. I was very concerned when Mark insisted on agreeing to your terms during the divorce. He was emotionally compromised. He wasn't thinking clearly. So I took the liberty of adding a small clarification to the final settlement agreement. A document which your client, Ms. Lowell, signed without, it seems, a thorough reading. He slid his own piece of paper across the table. placing it right next to the other one. It was a page from the divorce settlement. My gaze fell upon the highlighted paragraph. It was dense with legalese, but the meaning was crystal clear. It was a clause that explicitly referenced the original Articles of Incorporation and reaffirmed that any and all pre-existing provisions regarding intellectual property rights would remain in full force and effect, superseded by no other part of the settlement. It was a legal backstop, a fail-safe he had put in to protect me from my own despair. Jessica had been in such a hurry to get her 50%, so eager to push me out and claim her prize, she hadn't bothered to read the fine print. She had literally signed away her right to the very things that gave the business its value. She owned half of a company that was now just an empty shell. A workshop full of tools, a brand name, and a list of clients who wanted products she could no longer legally sell. Jessica stared at the two papers, her face crumbling. The mask of the powerful CEO disintegrated, revealing a woman in pure, unadulterated panic. The color drained from her face. "No," she whispered. "No, this can't be right." "I'm afraid it is," David said gently. "Mark owns the designs, all of them." Richard stood up abruptly. "This is a disaster." He spat, looking at Jessica with utter contempt. "This was your end of the deal. Your company. Your mess." He looked at me. "How much?" "Name a price. We'll buy the designs from you." I looked at him, then at Jessica. I saw the woman who had laughed at my pain, who had called our life a transaction. I saw the man who had helped her do it. They weren't asking, they were demanding. They still saw me as an obstacle to be bought off. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The pain, the hurt, the year of humiliation, it all coalesced into a single, quiet point of strength. I was no longer the broken man who had walked out of this office a year ago. I was the craftsman. I was the creator. And these were mine. I looked Richard dead in the eye. "They're not for sale," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the entire room. Jessica's head snapped up. "Mark, you can't do this. You'll ruin me. You'll ruin everything we built." "We didn't build it, Jessica," I said, the words coming easily now. "I built the furniture. You built a brand. It turns out the brand is worthless without the furniture. You didn't read the contract. You were so busy laughing at getting rid of me, you didn't read the fine print." I stood up. So did David. There was nothing more to say. We walked out of that office, leaving the wreckage behind us. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. 2 weeks later, I got another phone call. It was from the CEO of Zenith Grand Hotels. He had heard the whole story from his legal team. He apologized for the situation and told me they had officially canceled their contract with Artisan Creations. Then he asked me if I, Mark Peterson, the man who actually created the designs, would be interested in a contract to furnish his new hotels. It would be a smaller, more artisanal order to start, focusing on their flagship properties. They wanted quality, not quantity. They wanted the real thing. Today, I'm standing in a new workshop. It's 4 times the size of my old garage, filled with brand new equipment and the most beautiful timber I've ever seen. The air is thick with the smell of cedar and possibility. I have a small team of young, passionate woodworkers who I'm teaching my craft, my own craft. I never heard from Jessica again, but I heard the stories. Artisan Creations declared bankruptcy within 6 months. Richard left her as soon as the Zenith lawsuit was filed. She had to sell the big house on the hill to cover the legal fees. She lost everything she had betrayed me for. I don't feel joy at her downfall. I don't feel anger anymore. I just feel quiet. I run my hand over the smooth, sanded surface of a new table. feeling the life in the grain. It's a peace I earned, not through revenge, but by simply going back to who I was. I'm a builder, and I have finally built a life that cannot be taken from me. A life where I read every single word. That phrase, the end of the story, felt so final, so clean. I said it to myself in the quiet of my new workshop, like closing a heavy book. But life isn't a book. You can't just shut the cover and put it on a shelf. The characters don't freeze in place. They keep moving. They keep living. And sometimes, they circle back. My new life was defined by the scent of cedar. It was a sharp, clean, optimistic smell that clung to my clothes and hair, a constant reminder that I was building something new. The workshop was my sanctuary, a cavernous space filled with the cheerful hum of brand new machinery and the focused energy of my small crew. There were 3 of them. Alex, a young kid barely out of trade school with an artist's eye and an eagerness that reminded me of myself at 20. Maria, a quiet, meticulous woman in her 40s who could finish a piece of wood until it felt like silk. And Sam, a grizzly bear of a man who could handle a 400-pound slab of walnut like it was a feather pillow. They weren't just employees. They were my team, my responsibility. The Zenith contract was a beautiful monster. It was demanding, enormous, and pushed us to our absolute limits. The first phase was for their new flagship hotel in Chicago, a showpiece of luxury. We had to create over 200 custom pieces in 6 months. The days were long, a blur of sawdust, blueprints, and the scream of the saws. The nights were short, filled with paperwork, supply chain logistics, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing a new design come to life. For the first time since before the divorce, I was sleeping a deep, dreamless sleep. The kind that only comes from true bone-deep exhaustion and a sense of purpose. I felt solid, grounded. The ghosts of my past were fading, replaced by the tangible reality of grain and joinery. The man who had sat broken and hollow in that lawyer's office felt like a different person, someone I knew a long time ago. I was Mark Peterson again, the craftsman, the boss, the builder. The past was a closed chapter, or so I thought. It happened on a Wednesday, about 2 months into the Zenith project. We just solved a complex engineering problem with the cantilever desks for the suites, a small triumph that had the whole team buzzing. I was heading home, covered in a fine layer of sawdust, feeling that familiar, pleasant ache in my shoulders. I was thinking about the grocery list, about whether to pick up a pizza or try to cook something. Mundane, normal thoughts. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a call from a supplier. It was a text from an unknown number. My thumb hovered over the notification. "Mark, it's Jessica. We need to talk." The words hit me like a physical blow. A cold dread, slick and familiar, washed over me, chilling the sweat on my back. We need to talk. The same words. The same opening shot before the battle. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the city noise fading into a dull roar in my ears. My first instinct was pure, unadulterated anger. How dare she? After everything, how dare she try to crawl back into my life with those same cursed words? I almost deleted it. My thumb trembled over the trash icon. But then another feeling crept in, something unwelcome and confusing. Curiosity. What could she possibly want? The business was gone. The house was sold. The lawyers had been paid. There was nothing left to take. I didn't reply. I forced myself to walk home, but the simple thoughts of pizza and groceries were gone, replaced by a storm of questions. I got to my apartment, the cozy space above the bakery that had once felt like a refuge, and it suddenly felt small and confining. The smell of baking bread felt cloying. I called the one person I knew would understand. "David, it's Mark." "Mark, how are things? I saw that piece in the business journal about your Zenith contract. Congratulations. I knew you'd land on your feet." His voice was warm and fatherly. "Thanks, David. Things are good, but something's happened." I told him about the text. I read it to him verbatim. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its warmth and was now sharp, clinical. "Don't answer it, Mark. Do not reply. Block the number. Have no contact. What you have now, you built for yourself. She has no claim on it, legal or moral. A drowning person will pull you under with them. Remember that." I knew he was right. Every rational part of my brain knew he was right. "I know," I said. "I will." But I didn't block the number. I told myself I was keeping it just in case she tried to escalate, just to have a record. But that was a lie. A small, treacherous part of me was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped 2 days later. A voicemail this time. I was in the workshop, showing Alex how to use a hand plane to get a perfect edge. My phone buzzed on the bench. I ignored it until our lunch break. I saw the notification for a voicemail from the same number. I walked over to a quiet corner of the shop, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I pressed play. Her voice filled my ear, and it was a voice I didn't recognize. The confident, cutting tone was gone. The fake, bright charm was gone. This voice was thin, fragile. It cracked. "Mark, please. I know you hate me. You have every right to. But I'm in trouble. I wouldn't be asking if it wasn't serious. I just need to talk to you for 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. Please." Then a sound that might have been a choked sob before the click of the call ending. It was a masterful performance. Or maybe it wasn't a performance at all. That was the poison of it. The doubt, what if she really was in trouble? The image of her that I held in my mind, the triumphant, laughing woman in the power suit, was suddenly challenged by this new image of a broken person on the phone. Despite everything she had done, the thought of her being in real distress stirred something ugly and complicated in my gut. It wasn't love. It was a toxic, lingering sense of responsibility, the ghost of a promise I had made a lifetime ago to protect her. For a week, I was a mess. I was distracted at work. I made a costly mistake on a lumber order. Alex had to point out a measurement I had gotten wrong on a blueprint, something I hadn't done in years. My team noticed. They didn't say anything, but I could see the questions in their eyes. The solid ground I had been standing on was turning to quicksand. Then she forced my hand. I was working late one night, trying to catch up. It was after 9. The workshop quiet, except for the hum of the overhead lights. I was locking up when I saw a figure standing across the street, huddled in the doorway of a closed print shop, partially hidden in the shadows. Even from a distance, I knew it was her. She looked diminished. She was wearing a thin jacket that was inadequate for the evening chill, jeans, and sneakers. Her hair, which she had always kept so perfectly styled, was just pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked thin, worn out, a ghost haunting the edges of my new life. I felt a surge of anger. This was my place, my sanctuary. She had no right to be here. I almost got in my truck and drove away, pretending I hadn't seen her. But I couldn't. It was like watching a car wreck in slow motion. You know you shouldn't look, but you can't turn away. I walked across the street. As I got closer, I could see her more clearly. Her face was pale with dark circles under her eyes. She looked older than her years. When she saw me approaching, a look of desperate relief washed over her face. "Mark," she breathed. "Thank you." "What are you doing here, Jessica?" My voice was colder than I intended. "I didn't know where else to go. You didn't answer my calls. There's nothing for us to talk about." I started to turn away. "Please." Her voice was sharp with desperation. "Just let me buy you a coffee. Or I'll buy my own. Whatever. 5 minutes. Please. I swear I won't ever bother you again." I looked at her, standing there shivering in the weak glow of the streetlight. This wasn't the shark from the lawyer's office. This was a stray dog, beaten and hungry. David's words echoed in my head. A drowning person will pull you under. But my own stupid, bleeding heart whispered back, "What if you're the only one with a life raft?" "Fine," I heard myself say. "There's a diner a few blocks from here. It's open all night. I'll meet you there." I didn't want her in my truck. I didn't want her anywhere near my life. But I drove to the diner, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The whole way there, I was having an argument with myself. This is a mistake. She's manipulating you. This is what she does. The other side of me argued back, "What's the harm in listening? You're strong enough now. You can just listen and walk away." The diner was a relic from another time, all cracked vinyl booths and humming fluorescent lights. The air smelled of old coffee and fried onions. I chose a booth in the back corner. She slid in opposite me a few minutes later, wrapping her cold hands around the menu as if for warmth. A waitress came over, and I ordered a black coffee. Jessica just asked for a glass of water. For a long moment, she just stared down at the table. "Richard took everything," she finally said, her voice a low murmur. "When the Zenith deal fell apart, he said I was a liability. He had his lawyers draft a separation agreement that basically stripped me of every asset we'd acquired together. He called it recouping his investment in a failed venture. That venture was me." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "The lawsuit from Zenith. It was brutal. They settled, but it wiped out everything that was left from the business. I had to sell the house, the car, my jewelry, everything just to cover the legal fees and the settlement. I'm broke, Mark, completely." I just sat there, sipping my coffee, saying nothing. I was a stone wall. I wouldn't give her an inch. "I'm working as a cashier at a grocery store," she continued, a bitter twist to her lips. "I live in a tiny room in a boarding house. The woman who owns it is a tyrant. I share a bathroom with 4 other people. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" I did, actually. I remembered my little apartment above the bakery. I remembered the shame and the fear. But my humiliation was her fault. Hers was a mess of her own making. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, the words sounding hollow and formal even to my own ears. "Are you?" she shot back, a flicker of the old defiant Jessica showing through. Then it was gone, replaced by the mask of victimhood. "I deserve it. I know I do. I was awful to you, Mark. I was cruel and greedy, and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. You." She reached across the table, her hand hovering just above mine. I instinctively pulled my hand back. She flinched, her eyes filling with tears. This time, they looked real. "I don't want your pity," she whispered. I wanted to apologize. I needed to look you in the eye and tell you I was sorry. For everything." The silence stretched out. The apology hung in the air between us, thick and heavy. A part of me, A stupid, foolish part that I thought had died a year ago wanted to believe her. It wanted to accept the apology, to offer some small comfort, to feel like the bigger man. And, she added, her voice dropping even lower, I was hoping. I don't know. This is so hard to ask. Here it comes, I thought. The real reason. I was wondering if you might, I don't know, have any work for me? I stared at her, dumbfounded. Work? What kind of work? Anything, she said quickly. Sweeping the floors, answering the phone, making coffee for your crew. I know the business, Mark. I know the suppliers. I know how to manage a schedule. I could be an asset. I'd work for minimum wage, anything to get out of the hell I'm in. It was an insane proposal, a dangerously insane proposal, letting her into my workshop, into my new life. It was unthinkable. It was letting the fox into the henhouse. But she looked so desperate, so completely beaten. I'll think about it, I said, the words tasting like poison. It was the wrong thing to say. It was an open door, a sliver of hope that she immediately clung to. Her face lit up. Really? Mark, thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. Just to have a chance. I paid for my coffee and left her there. I walked out into the cold night air, my mind reeling. I had gone in there a stone wall and come out something else. Something cracked and uncertain. The image of her, broken and pleading, was now seared into my brain. Was it possible people could change? Did everyone, even Jessica, deserve a second chance? I drove home in a state of turmoil, the argument in my head raging louder than ever. The next few days were hell. I couldn't focus. I kept replaying the conversation in my mind, her tear-filled eyes, her thin, shivering frame. I felt guilty. Guilty for my success. Guilty for her failure. It made no sense, but the feeling was there. A toxic sludge in the bottom of my soul. I talked to David again. He was less than sympathetic. Are you out of your mind, Mark? This is a classic manipulation tactic. She plays the victim, preys on your decency, gets a foot in the door, and then what? Do you want to find out? Because I can promise you, it won't be pleasant. She's not your responsibility anymore. He was right, but the emotional hook was in deep. I found myself actually considering it. Maybe a limited role, something I could supervise, just until she got back on her feet. I was rationalizing, making excuses for an impulse I knew was profoundly stupid. That's when Sarah called. Sarah had been our bookkeeper at the old Artisan Creations for years. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, fiercely loyal and honest to a fault. When Jessica took over, she was one of the first people Jessica let go, replacing her with a younger, cheaper, and more pliable accountant. I hadn't spoken to Sarah since before the divorce. Mark Peterson? Her voice said over the phone. It was as crisp and direct as I remembered. Sarah, it's great to hear from you. How are you? I'm good, Mark, I'm good. I'm working for a construction firm now, much quieter. Listen, I heard about your new company. Saw your name in the paper. I just wanted to call and say congratulations. I always knew your talent was the real heart of that place. I'm so happy you're back on top. Thanks, Sarah. That means a lot. There's another reason I'm calling, Mark, she said, her tone shifting. I need you to be careful. I ran into Patty, you remember her? The receptionist Jessica hired? We had lunch last week. She told me something unsettling. A cold knot formed in my stomach. What did she tell you? She's still in touch with Jessica. Apparently Jessica's been bragging to her. She says she's found a way to solve her money problems. Her money problems? I asked, my voice tight. Yes, Sarah said. and I could hear the grim distaste in her voice. She's not just broke, Mark. She's in deep. According to Patty, Richard didn't just leave her. He also left her holding the bag on some very bad private loans he'd taken out using their joint assets as collateral. She owes some very unpleasant people a lot of money. People you don't want to be involved with. My blood ran cold. The image of the shivering victim in the diner began to warp, to change into something else. Patty said Jessica told her she had a plan. Sarah continued. She said she was going to play on your sympathies. She was going to get a job with you, any job. Enough to get access to your client lists, to your banking information, to the Zenith contract details. She said, and Patty quoted her on this, "He's a sentimental fool. He built it once. He can build it again for me. He owes me that much." She was planning on selling your information, Mark, to a competitor, to anyone who would pay. The room seemed to tilt. The air was sucked out of my lungs. The broken, fragile woman in the diner, the desperate pleas, the tears. It was all a lie. A calculated, venomous lie. She hadn't changed. She had just gotten more desperate. The drowning woman David had warned me about wasn't just going to pull me under. She was going to strip my pockets on the way down. "Mark, are you there?" Sarah's voice pulled me back. "Yes, Sarah, I'm here. Thank you. You have no idea what you've just done." After I hung up the phone, I sat in the silence for a long time. The conflict inside me was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The last lingering wisp of pity or doubt was extinguished, burned away by the truth. I felt a profound, chilling sense of release. The ghost was gone. I finally saw her for what she was, not who I wanted her to be or who she pretended to be, but for the calculating, destructive person she had become. She texted me the next day. "Have you thought about my offer?" I texted back. "Yes. Meet me at the same diner, 6 o'clock. I got there first and sat in the same booth. This time, I wasn't nervous. I was calm. When she slid into the booth opposite me, she had a hopeful, expectant look on her face. She had put on a little makeup. She looked less like a victim and more like someone about to close a deal. "Mark," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thanks for meeting me." I didn't waste any time. "I spoke to Sarah," I said. The smile on Jessica's face froze. I saw a flicker of confusion, then panic in her eyes. "Sarah? The old bookkeeper?" "The very same," I said, my voice level. "It seems you've been quite talkative. About your debts, about your plan, about the sentimental fool whose business you were planning to sell off piece by piece." The color drained from her face. The mask didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. The broken victim was gone. The confident CEO was gone. What was left was something raw and ugly. Her expression hardened into a snarl of pure hatred. "She's lying," she hissed. But there was no conviction in it. "Is she, Jessica? Is she really?" I leaned forward. "You came to me with a story about being a cashier, about sharing a bathroom. You cried, you apologized, and the whole time you were planning to gut me all over again. It wasn't enough to take half the business and run it into the ground. It wasn't enough to try and steal my life's work. You had to come back for the scraps." Her face twisted with fury. "You owe me," she spat, her voice low and vicious. "You think you're so perfect, with your new company and your big contract. Where would you be without me? You'd still be a nobody in a garage smelling of sawdust. I made you. I built that brand. You took it all away from me." I just looked at her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel hurt. I felt nothing but a vast, empty distance. She was a stranger. A dangerous stranger. "I didn't take anything from you, Jessica," I said quietly. You had it all. And you threw it away because you didn't bother to read the fine print. You were too busy laughing. I stood up, pulling a $20 bill from my wallet and dropping it on the table. "For the water," I said. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel her glare on my back, full of impotent rage. I walked out of the diner and into the crisp evening air. And for the first time, I felt truly, completely free. The last chain had been broken. I went back to the workshop. The lights were on. My team was working late, trying to get ahead on the Zenith order. The sound of a sander, the smell of fresh-cut oak, the sight of Alex and Maria discussing a blueprint, it all washed over me. This was real. This was my life. Not the drama, not the ghosts, not the lies. The work, the building, the creation. I had built it, and this time, I had built it to last. I walked back into the workshop that night, feeling like a man who had just passed through a great fire and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but cleansed. The air inside, thick with the scent of oak and the quiet industry of my team, was the purest thing I had ever smelled. That confrontation in the diner wasn't a victory. It was an exorcism. I had finally, fully, cast Jessica out. Not just from my life, but from my head. The weeks that followed were some of the most productive I'd ever had. A weight I didn't even know I was still carrying had been lifted. My mind was clear, my hands steady. The designs for the Zenith project flowed out of me, sharp and confident. We were ahead of schedule, and the quality of the work was impeccable. The camaraderie in the shop was strong. We were a well-oiled machine, a small family forged in sawdust and shared purpose. I started paying Alex and Maria a higher wage, and I gave Sam a bonus. I was building more than furniture. I was building a good place to be. The past was a closed-off room, the door locked and bolted. I didn't think about Jessica. I didn't think about Richard or her lawyers or the ugly mess of the divorce. I was moving forward, one perfectly planned board at a time. I was finally convinced that the story truly was over. But the thing about a story like mine, a story with characters as destructive as Jessica, is that it doesn't just end. It leaves a crater. And sometimes other things crawl out of that crater. It started subtly. A phone call to the workshop's main line about 3 weeks after the diner incident. I was in the back supervising the assembly of a large credenza when Maria came to get me. "Mark, there's a man on the phone for you," she said, a slight frown on her face. "He won't give his name. Just says he's calling about a mutual acquaintance." I felt a faint, cold prickle on the back of my neck, but I brushed it aside. It was probably a supplier I'd forgotten. I took the phone in my small office, a glassed-in cubicle overlooking the workshop floor. "This is Mark Peterson." The voice on the other end was smooth, deep, and unnervingly calm. "Mr. Peterson, thank you for taking my call. I'm calling on behalf of a party who has a vested financial interest in the recent affairs of Ms. Jessica Lowell." The cold prickle turned into a spear of ice. "I have no connection to Ms. Lowell," I said, my voice flat. "Whatever business you have with her is between you and her. You have the wrong number." "I don't think I do," the voice purred. "You see, Mr. Peterson, our associates believe in following the money. And it seems that just as Ms. Lowell's fortunes took a rather dramatic downturn, yours took an equally dramatic upturn. The Zenith contract, for instance, a very impressive acquisition. One might even call it convenient." The insinuation was vile, but clear. He was suggesting I had somehow conspired to ruin her and take the contract for myself. It was the same twisted logic Jessica had screamed at me in the diner. "My business is my business," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "It has nothing to do with her. I have nothing more to say." I hung up. My heart was pounding. It was one of Sarah's unpleasant people. The reality of it was suddenly very close. It wasn't just a story she'd heard. It was a man on my phone line. I stood there for a long moment, looking out at the workshop, at the peaceful, productive scene. My sanctuary. A wave of fierce, protective anger washed over me. This was mine. No one was going to poison it. I tried to shake it off, to chalk it up to a desperate creditor on a fishing expedition. I didn't mention it to anyone. I didn't want to bring that darkness into my workplace. But a week later, the darkness came knocking. He was standing at the front entrance of the workshop, looking in through the glass door. He wasn't what I expected. He wasn't a heavy-set man with a broken nose. He was tall, thin, and impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit that looked like it cost more than my first truck. He had silver hair and a calm, predatory stillness. He looked more like a corporate lawyer than a leg breaker. Alex went to the door. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here to see Mr. Peterson," the man said, his voice the same smooth purr from the phone. He smiled, but it didn't reach his cold, gray eyes. "My name is Corbin." I walked over, my stomach twisting into a hard knot. "I can help you," I said, stepping between him and Alex. "We're not open to the public." "I'm not the public, Mr. Peterson," he said, his gaze sweeping over the workshop, taking in the new machinery, the stacks of expensive hardwood. It was an appraiser's gaze, cold and calculating. "I believe we spoke on the phone. I was hoping for a more personal chat." I didn't want him inside. "We have nothing to chat about." He sighed, a theatrical display of disappointment. "Jessica owes my associates a considerable amount of money. Money she acquired in part by leveraging her stake in her former company. A company whose primary assets, your designs, mysteriously vanished from her control just as she was about to cash in. Now, you have those assets, and a very lucrative contract using them. From where we stand, Mr. Peterson, it looks like a shell game. It looks like you helped her hide assets from her creditors. And my associates, they don't like games." The accusation was so outrageous, it almost made me laugh. "That's insane. The divorce records are public. The corporate filings are public. It's all there. I didn't hide anything. She signed away her rights." Mr. Corbin smiled again. "Ah, yes. The fine print. A clever trick. But legal documents can be reinterpreted, especially when one party has a strong incentive to cooperate. We believe that with the proper motivation, you might be persuaded to see your financial obligation to Ms. Lowell's debts in a new light." "I have no obligation," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Now get out of my workshop." He didn't move. His gaze drifted past me, to where Maria was carefully sanding the edge of a tabletop. "This is a beautiful operation you have here, Mr. Peterson," he said, his voice soft. "So much expensive equipment, such skilled employees. A fire or an accident, it would be a tragedy. A terrible, terrible tragedy." The threat was unmistakable. It hung in the air between us, as sharp and as real as a blade. It wasn't just about me anymore. He was threatening my people, my business, everything I had rebuilt. My fear was instantly replaced by a cold, clear fury. "Is that a threat?" He raised his hands in a gesture of mock surrender. "Merely an observation about the uncertain nature of business. I'll leave you my card. Perhaps you'll reconsider our conversation. We find that most people eventually do." He placed a crisp, black business card on the door handle and turned, walking away as calmly as he had arrived. I watched him go, my whole body trembling. I picked up the card. It just had a name, Corbin, and a phone number. Nothing else. I shut the door and locked it. My team was staring at me, their faces full of concern. The cheerful energy of the workshop was gone, replaced by a tense silence. "Who was that guy?" Sam asked, his big hands clenched into fists. I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to hide this from them. We were a team. "He's a man my ex-wife owes money to. He thinks I'm responsible for her debts." "That's crazy," Alex said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to call my lawyer," I said. "And then we are going to get back to work. We are not going to let people like that intimidate us." But even as I said it, the fear was a cold stone in my gut. This was a different kind of fight. This wasn't about contracts and fine print. This was something darker, something that didn't play by any rules I understood. I called David immediately. His reaction was swift and serious. "Do not talk to him again, Mark. Document everything he said. The threat about the fire, everything. If he comes back, you call the police immediately. These are not people you reason with." We installed a new security system that night, with cameras covering every angle of the workshop, inside and out. I told my team to be vigilant, to never be in the building alone. The sanctuary had been breached. The easy peace was gone, replaced by a low-humming anxiety. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. The silence was almost worse than the confrontation. Every time the phone rang, I flinched. Every unfamiliar car that slowed down on the street outside sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I was living on a knife's edge. Then, one Monday morning, I came in early, before anyone else. As I unlocked the front door, I knew immediately that something was wrong. The air was different, colder. I turned on the lights. Everything looked normal. The tools were in their places, the projects were untouched. I walked through the entire space, my heart pounding. Nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then I got to my personal workbench in the far corner, the one place that was mine alone. And I saw it. Sitting perfectly in the center of a piece of tiger maple I had been preparing was a single black business card. Corbin's card. He had been inside. He had bypassed the brand new locks, walked through my workshop, and left his calling card in the most personal space I had. He hadn't broken anything. He hadn't stolen anything. He had just wanted me to know. "I can get to you anytime I want. Your locks mean nothing. Your safety is an illusion." That was the moment I realized that this story wasn't about Jessica anymore. She was just the detonator. The explosion was still spreading. She had unleashed something she couldn't control, and now it was my problem. I stood there looking at that card, and I felt the old fear, the old sense of victimhood, trying to claw its way back, the feeling of being powerless. But then I looked around the room. I looked at the beautiful, half-finished furniture, the zenith pieces. I looked at the tools I had bought with my own hard-earned money. I thought of my team, who trusted me, who depended on this place. And the fear burned away, replaced by something harder. Resolve. I was not the same man who had surrendered his business to his wife because he was too tired to fight. I had fought my way out of that pit. I had built this new life with my own 2 hands. I had faced my past and won. I would not let some ghost in a fancy suit tear it down. I picked up the card, not with trembling fingers, but with a steady hand. I walked to my office, took out my phone, and called the police to file a report. Then I called David. Then I walked out onto the workshop floor, picked up a hand plane, and got to work. Because that's what a builder does. When the foundation is threatened, you don't run. You reinforce it. You make it stronger. You prepare for the storm. And you defend what you have built.